Events in the world that have been happening, like the port strike, like hurricanes that have really affected certain regions of the South, and we see all kinds of other issues in this world that has been happening. And this is causing many Christians to ask, are we in the end of times? Are these events evidence that we are nearing the return of Christ? As we see natural disasters, we see war with Israel and now Iran. We still see Ukraine and Russia. We still see so many things in this world that are causing many Christians to ask these types of questions. And some Christians aren't even necessarily asking, some Christians are actually just asserting and saying, we are in the end of times. Today, I'm going to be going over some ideas that I think show that this is not correct. And this may seem weird, given how many evangelical fundamentalist type Christians we see purporting this idea. But I think we have good reason to believe that we are not in the end of days, the end of times. At least not in the way that these people are trying to articulate. One of the arguments that I've seen that people have been using to support the hypothesis that we are in the end of times is Revelation chapter 12. And they are using some kind of star as evidence of this. We see some kind of new sign in the heavens, as they would like to say. And this is not new. We've seen Christians quote this over all kinds of years. I just saw another Christian the other day saying that the star first appeared in 2017, and then boom, here's the 7-year tribulation. So we must be a couple months away from Christ's return, according to some Christians. So let's take a look at Revelation chapter 12, because I've seen so many Christians quote Revelation 12. So here, Revelation 12 starts off with saying, "A great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in the heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his head. His tail swept a third of the stars of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that he might devour her child the moment it was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled to the desert to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days." So I'll just end it right there. That's verses 1 through 6. And I'll read a little bit more if anybody would like to hear anything. But I think I can get most of my point just through these first 6 verses. Revelation 12 is not an end-time prophecy. It's not about the end of the world. Just reading it, you can see that it's clearly and obviously talking about Jesus. A male son will be born, a male child, and he will rule all nations with an iron scepter. This is a clear and direct fulfillment of they're trying to show that Jesus is the fulfillment of the Isaiah passages, the Isaiah prophecies, where it talks about some messianic figure ruling the world with an iron scepter. And the author of Revelation, John, is trying to show, hey, this is Jesus. And see, this is the birth of Jesus. She's the woman, Mary, is about to give birth to Jesus. And the red dragon, which is obviously a symbol for the Luciferian being, the satanic being that we all know and talk about so much. This is as clear as it can get. We can see it as explicit as you can even see it. So this is during the birth of Jesus. During the birth of Jesus, this satanic figure is attempting to get rid of the child. And if you read the account of Matthew, the early account of Matthew, where it talks about once Christ is born, Herod is overtaken, and Herod wants to kill all of the baby boys in Jerusalem. And this is clearly what John is getting at here in Revelation. Um, he wanted to devour the baby boy. And through this, God prepares a place and tells Mary to go to Egypt for this many amount of days. So she stays there until Herod has died, and then they can go back to Jerusalem. So that's really all that's happening here. So when John is writing this had already happened. And so like let's say Revelation is dated to 100, 110 A.D. This event that we're telling here, most scholars would probably say Jesus was born somewhere around like 4 B.C. So, I mean, we're talking about something that had happened 114 or so years prior. So there's no reason to think that this passage has anything to do with the end of time. Not even a little bit. And even if you were to continue going through this passage, it talks about a war in heaven. Something that, again, had already happened. So these are things that just, there's no reason to say that Revelation 12 has anything to do with the end of time. It's nowhere in the passage. Now, another big one is obviously Matthew 24. This is like one of the most quoted passages when talking about the end of the times. Taking a look at this passage, particularly, we mentioned a little bit of the Helene hurricane. We see Israel at war. We saw possible famines where everybody went into panic buying for the port strike. Everybody was worried about that, but here now we see that it's resolved. I meant to try to get this video out previously, but I can still get the point across even without this. So these people, when they're worrying about this, they will quote Matthew 24 verses anywhere from like verse 5-ish, 6-ish, to like verse 10 to kind of support this idea. And it starts off like this. Verse 6, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. But see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places, and all these are the beginning of birth pains. Then you will be handed over and be persecuted, put to death. You will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And as it just continues through this line of thought. So, people will say, hey, well, look at all of the natural disasters that are happening right now. This is an exact fulfillment of what Jesus is saying. I think the biggest problem I have with this view is that, well, when you look at this passage, Jesus isn't talking to a 21st century audience here. He's talking to his disciples, right? The disciples ask him, right after he talks about the stones being destroyed, taking off at the temple. And then they ask him, tell us, when will this happen? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? So Jesus is answering them from that perspective of that day, right? And this is why in the verse where he talks about the people of this generation will see this come to play, right? Like the people living of this day will see this, right? Like that's the entire thing here. And I think a lot of people miss that point because, if that's really what's happening, then this goes into why some scholars will say, well, hey, was Jesus a false, did he give a false prophecy here? He predicted the end of the world. He predicted his coming, and he didn't come, right? This is the fig tree view that some people say, where that's verses 32 through 35. But see, the issue is that Jesus nowhere predicts his coming in this passage. And I know this is going to sound weird. That when Jesus talks about his coming, where he says, the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming from the clouds of the sky with power and great glory, right? That's the passage, verses 30 through 30. Well, that's really just verse 30 right there. I was going to say 31 also, but really just verse 30 is fine. So verse 30, Jesus is obviously quoting Daniel chapter 7, which is about that figure that gains all dominion. This also is not. Daniel 7 is not about a messianic figure coming down from heaven It's about a Son of Man figure being ascended to the heavens, if that makes any sense. And what this means is that it's not saying that this is the return of Christ. This is saying this is the this is when Jesus is ascended and put at the right hand of the Father. This is when the Father has given him all dominion and glory, like we see in Daniel 7. It's these two Son of Man figure, or the Son of Man figure and the Ancient of Days in Daniel 7. So this passage has nothing to do with the end of time, but everything to do with the destruction of the Jewish temple in 70 AD. So I think this is a basic way for me to describe that. So if you guys like this kind of content, you enjoyed this video, if you agree with me or disagree with me, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.